Well, Eric, thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate it. For those who don't know, why don't you describe your role in the creation of Huntington Beach's Central Park?
Okay, I was an employee of Eckbo, Dean, Austin, and Williams, who was the landscape architectural office who was awarded the contract for Huntington Beach Central Park. And Francis Dean, who was the principal in charge, asked me to be the project manager for the park. And so I saw the park through from the very beginning to the final completion of the park. During the construction, then the initial design. If you'd like, I can go into some of the early details of what we encountered, because it was a difficult site. It had been denuded by a number of different activities. There had been the Huntington Beach peat bog, or peat company, I believe it was, and it was beyond the windrow where peat was being bogged. The peat bog was being mined,
right.
And just beyond that was a kind of swampy area that was in the process of being filled with concrete for a trailer park. There was the oil works around the area, which were then around the library. And on the other side, over by Huntington Lake, it was all sand. A lot of that soil had been taken away for various activities. Along Talbot Lake, they had been dumping concrete and asphalt because they'd removed a lot of soil for the construction of the, I believe it was the 405 freeway.
So the bodies of water were already there.
Oh, pardon me?
The bodies of water were already there when you started.
That's correct. On the Talbot side, the lake was there, but it was a fluctuating lake dependent upon the rainy season and the introduction of tidal action from Bolsa Chica. On the other side, Huntington Lake, it was a quarry, and it was in the process of being dug. And the story that I got, and I didn't see that, but they said that the equipment in the quarry that was doing the digging was actually left because the water, they hit the water table, and the water rose so quickly that they didn't have time to get the equipment out. So they left it in there. So it became part of the habitat for fish in that area. And so to the best of my knowledge, it may still be down there. I don't think it was ever taken out.
Wow.
The bluff above Huntington Lake had been an auto dismantling company. And for years, they just took the oil and everything else from the crankcases and everything else and dumped it onto the slope. And the reason we know that is because during construction, the engineers, the Huntington Beach engineers, were the public works people. That was their job. And we got out there, and one of the large bulldozers hit this black sludge, and it was nothing but just super saturated soil with years and years of oil dumping. And one of the engineers said, "Rick, now what do we do?" And I said, structurally, I don't know what we can do, but from a landscape standpoint, we could sure try hydroseeding, which is a process of spraying seed onto soil, and you can do that with flowers and shrubs and trees and everything else. And we decided that eucalyptus would probably be one of the hardiest things to plant, so we sprayed the entire slope with eucalyptus. So all of those eucalyptus now that are above Huntington Lake were all started literally from seed.
Wow.
Became the because otherwise it was black sludge and nobody could do anything with it.
Eric,
so
what was the philosophy sort of driving the vision originally for Central Park?
Okay,
understanding that you're going to encounter things like you just described, but beyond that, what did you go in there thinking about doing? How did you envision the park originally?
Okay, the philosophy, I was given a lot of latitude because the principal was really very generous. And I was very familiar with Olmsted's work in Central Park and wanted to see it be a kind of flexible, open, natural park.
And when
And
you say Central Park, you're talking about Central Park,
Central Park in New York.
New York City.
And its concept was to have large multiple use open spaces so that people could go in and use the park in many, many ways. And that seemed to make a lot of sense for Huntington Beach Central Park. So we designed it around these large meadows so that people could go in one day and play a football game, the next day have a concert, the next day just enjoy a picnic out on the lawn, rather than building lots of stock football or baseball sports facilities that limit the use to one use only. And the Parks Department and the group that was running, the design liked that idea very much because it added a tremendous flexibility to the park and allowed many different people to use it. The parks director had thought that maybe it should be pushed more in the direction of kind of single purpose use, and fortunately our concept prevailed where we could actually put it in with these more flexible spaces. Plus, it extended the construction cost tremendously because our budget was $1,100,000 for the entire 360 acre park, and so it required a lot of kind of creative thinking on just how to stretch this as far as possible.
By the way, Eric, I found this photo. Here you are back in the early 70s. If you can look at your screen there.
Yes.
Your team, which is interesting. There was this piece put together by the city that, as you can see here, the day the park opened, June 1974. And they were describing, you and your associates at EDAW. And tell me about this. This is a picture of a scale model of the restroom that's there on the Gothard side, right?
Okay, the building designer was Alfred Caldwell, who was a professor at USC in the School of Architecture, and previously he had been an instructor at IIT, Illinois Institute of Technology, and he had a strong background in the modernist movement, which was sort of what you can see in this model.
Mm-hmm.
He had worked with Jens Jensen, who did major park construction in Chicago. He had also worked with Frank Lloyd Wright. He had worked and designed some of Mies van der Rohe's buildings at IIT. So his background was extensive, and we had consulted with him, and ECBO, Dean Austin Williams, decided to hire him. And so this building reflects that philosophy. And the reason for this raised elevation, which became actually the little kind of canyon, if you will, underneath the building, was because the topography from that side of the park, which would be the east side of the park, had that separation in grade, and we thought it would be awfully nice to have it be a kind of overlooking pavilion that would look out into the grass areas, and then develop eventually that stone kind of garden area underneath. However, the budget didn't allow that at the time, and when I was over there walking not too long ago, it still hasn't been developed, but it would be nice. All those stones were Arizona flagstones that were large slabs that were easily constructed, but that was about as far as it went. But as you see, if you've walked through that building, you get up on that higher elevation and have the opportunity to then look out at the landscape beyond. And there was a lot of kind of romantic ideas, the idea that people would picnic up there and next to the restroom and all. And it was maybe partially successful, but at least the buildings that do remain were part of that original plan.
I wish we could find that model. I don't think the model exists anymore, but you were describing to me the other day that these were very elaborate models.
Oh, they are absolutely elaborate. The undulating surface down below is walnut, and they were slabs that were laminated, and then they were ground by hand. It was all done by a person that was very, very good. He had been a student at USC, but he ground the walnut to have that wonderful shape that was kind of a feeling of soil. And then all the buildings were made out of brass I-beams and T-sections and things that were gotten from a train store over in West Los Angeles, where they had all of this material, and then they would be, assembled to replicate the actual metal construction, because these buildings were essentially a steel beam construction, with the interior area where the restroom was being a central core, if you will. It was clad with tile to be, excuse me, about as durable as it could be. And then the slabs were poured concrete, and they were colored with integral color to last, and they actually have lasted extremely well. And they have cracked very little too, because they were really well engineered. They were good buildings. Yeah, now that little picture is in the nature preserve, and that was going to be a little animal lookout, bird lookout, kind of a little pavilion. But as you can see, the same idea. The roof was a cantilevered structure over that central beam, which were I-beams put together, and then there was a little stand there, and the idea was that people could sit there and observe nature and watch birds and that kind of thing.
What about looking here? These are early photos. I mean, these are sort of pre-park, right before I think you and your team started working.
Yes.
When you mentioned getting out there, Eric, originally, was there any excavation done? Did you find anything in terms of artifacts or sort of old pieces of history when you were, creating the park?
No, there really wasn't. The excavation did occur. What we did on the Huntington Beach, or on the Huntington Lake side, was we brought the peat moss. We excavated the peat moss over by Talbot Lake, brought it over on the other side where all the sand was, because we were working with Soil and Plant Lab to make best decisions about the condition of the soil. And the agronomist with the lab said, "Rick, why don't you bring over peat moss? It'll help to improve the soil, and it's all readily available." So we excavated that, brought it over to the other side, and reconditioned the soil. And then the artifacts were basically the remnants of mankind out there: broken concrete, broken asphalt, old car parts, tires, you name it. It was kind of a dumping ground, frankly. It showed a lot of foresight on the city's part to get that and turn it in. In fact, in your picture, just on the right, you can see some of the junk that was out there. The chunks there are probably chunks of concrete and other things that were left. But they were capped over. They were again, because of budget, we couldn't just clean up the site 100%. So we worked with it the best we could. So that picture is, let me see, that must be Golden West.
Golden West is over here.
So we're looking at Huntington Lake in the foreground, and then Talbot Lake toward the top. So actually that wasn't Golden West. Golden West would be between the two lakes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right here.
Right there, yes, yeah. And then where the windrow is, a little bit to the right of your arrow, was where the library went in.
Exactly.
And that was done by Richard Neutra, who, again, was a modernist, very good architect. His offices were up in Los Angeles, and Richard was there to start the project, and he passed away, and his son, Dion, picked it up and carried it through.
here you get, again, the city had these wonderful photos of just, I guess, when you all were, doing the first basic steps there. You mentioned earlier that you were at the park recently. When you're there today, how does it seem to you? Are there any things you would change? Do you think it stood the test of time? Is it what you set out to do? What's it like for you today when you walk there, knowing that you were part of the vision that created it in the first place?
Yes. Now, it's, some of the trees have died out, and I would probably replant some of those trees, especially around Talbot Lake. It could be very nice, and probably a little bit around the large meadow near Huntington Lake, just to give it a little more of an edge quality to it. We had a lot more sycamores in the park than I saw when I was walking around. The eucalyptus, which were kind of the mainstay of the park, are still doing quite well. I think the level of maintenance, I was pleasantly surprised, really, for a park as large as that is, that things looked reasonably well maintained. I noticed that some of the buildings that we had have been removed, but in the days when we did those buildings, the unisex restrooms were not even considered. And now, of course, I understand completely why they brought in the new unisex restrooms, because that's the way it is. And they've done a nice job with those. But there's really no going back. Time changes, and
And I
that's
think too, a
perfectly okay.
lot of it has to do with there are volunteers there that help obviously maintain a lot of what's going on. Steve and his wife Sherry Angle. I don't know. I know you've been talking to Sherry recently, but they
Yes.
certainly dedicated countless hours, volunteer hours, to work at the Secret Garden and develop that part of the park as well as other parts. Juana Mueller is another one who has been just a real trailblazer in terms of park development and maintenance and all that. But it all started with you guys, and again, you created, I think, a park for the ages. I mean, obviously, in today's day and age, are challenges that didn't exist when you guys built the park, designed the park. There have been, given the way just society is today, there are certain homeless havens in there that have become part of the story that people deal with and the city deals with. And again, parks become habitats for lots of different things as time goes on and things change, and socially we have a lot of kind of overflow. So the park functions in a lot of different ways these days. What's your take on the library there, in terms of that kind of city hub in that kind of beautiful setting?
Yeah, I was actually quite pleased to see how many people of different activity levels were in the park the day I was there. That some were up by the library, some were down in the Secret Garden, doing all kinds of things, which was the idea of the park. It was supposed to have that wonderful flexibility. And after all, nearly 50 years, it was nice to see that that was still the way the park was being used. And just a quick note, Talbot Lake changes, and it was supposed to change. It was designed to be a very alive kind of thing. When it rained heavily for a few years, the lake would fill up and be a totally different look than when it was very dry. And some days, or when it was a dry year, it would be a meadow. So you could literally walk from one side over to the library and never touch water. And we brought in entomologists when we were doing this, and they said, yeah, there's no reason why you can't have this be a natural lake. There's enough insect life out here that it will change. When it gets wet, it's wet. When it gets dry, it's dry. And we like that idea. And now it's showing a kind of a medium level. There's water there, and if it gets a lot drier, it'll be a grass meadow again, which is okay.
What
So
about
it was
the play
built with
area?
that idea.
And I love the fact that it fluctuates like that. I think that it's a very unique aspect. What about the kids' play area that's up on the hill there?
Let's see, the kids' play area. I saw the one that was up toward. I'm forgetting the street. The north one up by the gas station. Is that Edwards, or was that?
Well, you have Golden West, you have Slater, then you have Gothard.
Maybe it was Gothard,
Yeah.
at the corner of Golden West, where the gas station and the nursery are. There's a play area there, and that was added later on by the city.
Right, but the one, the one that's kind of like the Tom Sawyer Huck Finn thing, where they had sort of the lake and the hammers and nails. Were you guys part of that at all?
That must have been added. Was that up by the library?
Yeah, it was added
Yeah.
in 1975. I didn't know if
Okay.
that was part of the design or if the city
No,
went ahead and added that.
no. Some of those kind of things, simply because of cost, we weren't able to add in. Norm Worthy, the parks director at that time, had some other plans of things that he wanted to have, but we kind of waited and I talked it over with the parks commissioner and decided let's keep it as simple as possible, because we really wanted to have trees be a main part of the park. And if we used all the money up for these other things, which would not have been inexpensive, we wouldn't have had any money for trees. I was mentioning to someone else, all of the trees that are in the park were 1 gallon trees. That was as much as we could afford. And that we planted them. Valley Crest was the landscape contractor. We planted 1 gallons, which were about 8 inches tall, possibly, out of the can. And the city said, "My gosh, they're going to be trampled." And I said, "Well, let's put out a note to the city, the population, that the fence or the park will be fenced for a year, and there will be tours through the park so that people can see that the trees are growing, but we'll get the number of trees in that will eventually give us the backbone to this park, because the trees were I think, one of the most important things in the park." Then the city, to their credit, went along with us and said, "Let's do it." And so we got all these little trees in the ground, and look at them today, thinking that every single one of those was about 6 inches high.
Amazing, just
Yeah.
amazing. Eric, I want to thank you again for your work that you did in the park, for taking some time to chat today. Once things get back to normal, the Angles and I were talking about, obviously, you coming to visit the park, maybe doing a walking tour, and we can have this kind of conversation in person as we go throughout. And I'm sure you'll see things in the moment that'll jump out and remind you of things. So if you're up for that, why don't we plan that visit as soon as we can? And
I'd be happy to, Chris. Yeah.
a lot of interested people, I think, in coming to hear you speak. There's a nice amphitheater there. Were you part of that? Was that part of?
No, but I thought it was a great idea. And again, had we had some extra cash, we probably would have put that one in, because I thought it was very nice, and the way it overlooks Talbot and its proximity to the library was really quite nice.
Well, that's where you can speak. It'll be perfect. So, Eric, thank you very much. I appreciate you taking the time.
My pleasure. Well, thanks for you taking the time, and I'm really delighted with the interest that's being built up with the park.